In this video, we're going to look at the nuts and bolts of putting a program together, or a schedule of works. Now, all a schedule of works or a program of works is a list of the various tasks that go to make up a complete job. In this case, we're going to use the example of building a fence. Obviously, to build a fence, the first thing we have to do is start the job. So if I click on the first task name, this is this column here is the list of tasks we're going to undertake. So first task is start the job. Start job. The next task, now assuming we're going to build a fence down one side of a property, first thing we've got to do is dig the holes for the fence posts. So dig holes. Once we've dug the holes, we have to basically stand and brace the fence posts. And essentially, if you think the way, as one action, standing a fence post would be, you cut the fence post to size, you stand it in the hole, you put a couple of diagonal braces of timber just to hold it plumbed up with a level, and make sure that all of the fence posts are in line. Once we've stood all of the fence posts, the next job would be to pour concrete in the holes around the fence post in order to hold the fence post in place. So pour concrete. Next job after pouring the concrete is basically to fix the fence rails. Only before we can fix the fence rails, you'll have to leave time for the concrete to go off and harden. Now, allowing time for the concrete to harden is as much a task as anything else. It takes up time. So assuming, say, we have to leave the concrete to harden for 3 days until it's sufficiently set that it's not going to disturb and it's going to hold the places to post. So curing time is as much a task, as I say, as any other. So curing time, and then once the concrete has had time to set and we're all good to go, then finally we can fix the fence rails. So fix fence rails. Once we fix the fence rails, we can then install either the fence palings if it's a board and batten fence or whatever, or the fence panels if they're pre-made panels. So if I say let's fix fence palings, we'll assume that it's a board fence. That helps if I spell it correctly. It's fence, not fence, obviously. Now you notice how much effort I had to put in just to change fence to fence. Now that's because essentially when you're editing these lines, there are a lot of things that sort of sit hanging on them. So a double click will take me into an information dialog box, which popped up because I basically double clicked twice. In order to alter, edit the text I'm writing in here, I have to basically long click and second click in order to get into it. And it's easy to double click too fast. It's easy to this. The thing is not that reactive. Now there is a much better way of editing information, and it's called an entry bar. And the way we get to that is first to go into File and into Options, and under Display there's a number of options you can tick on here. This one down the bottom here, entry bar, is the one we want. So I click on that and then OK. Now it puts up an editing bar here. So when I have an editing bar up here, I can actually click on that quite easily and nicely and change things within each field, and it will automatically change to whatever I'm actually clicked on at the time. And it just makes editing and typing in information into these individual fields actually just quicker and easier, and is just a good thing to have up. So anyway, moving on. So after we fix the fence palings, you think, well, okay, job complete, but no, not quite. What about painting the fence or staining the fence? So we're going to paint this fence. So next heading would be paint fence. Once the fence is painted, now we can say the job is complete. Job complete. And that is essentially all there is to the methodology or the work breakdown structure of the program. Now you notice at this point that I've actually got no other information other than a list of tasks, and that is because at this point in time I am manually scheduling. And basically there are two options. You can manually schedule a job of works, or you can automatically schedule it. When you're manually scheduling it, all the software does is it takes exactly what you write. So I've written this and it does nothing else. When I auto schedule, it will automatically fill in information and start building the program for me. Usually you would want to be scheduling as auto scheduled rather than manual. The reason I've had it in manual thus far is essentially so that we could concentrate on these tasks and nothing else. Now, manually and automatically scheduled tasks are essentially controlled in the task bar, the task tab, and there are two buttons here, manually scheduled and auto scheduled. And they basically will toggle between, if I click on a task and set it to auto schedule, it will toggle across. Globally, in terms of any new tasks being put in, this button down here controls that. You can see there it says new tasks are manually scheduled, and if I click it, you get an option. Auto scheduled tasks, manually scheduled tasks, and it says all new tasks auto scheduled. They're calculated by Microsoft Project or manually. So if I now click this over to auto scheduled, and then I input a task, you can see it automatically starts filling in information for me. The first thing it says is this job 1 day or is it more? And it's prompting me to actually put in how many days duration the job is, and it provides a start date. And the start date is governed by the start date of the program. So I'm actually doing this now on the 5th of March, and it's a new file, so Microsoft Project has picked up that the start of the job is the 5th of March. It could just as easily be any other date that I want to put in. At this moment, we'll just leave it set at this. But you can see here now it indicates a day worth of work. If I change it to, say, 2 days, it lengthens out to suit accordingly. So, and this is what we're going to do with the rest of the job now. So first thing I'll do is just delete this line, and I delete the line by clicking on the number, just as a sort of by the way thing. If I click on the task name and delete the task name, I'll delete the text only. I don't delete the actual line of the works. To delete the line of the works, I delete on the task number to select all of it, and then hit the delete button on my keyboard. So by the same token, if I wanted to insert a line into this program here, I would click on the task where I want to insert it, and then simply press the insert key on my keyboard, which will then insert a line. And likewise, to delete the line out, click on the number to select the whole line, and then hit the delete key. That's how it works. Simple as that. Right, now, to change the work over to auto scheduled, first off I'm going to select all of the tasks I want to change, which in this case is all of them. So I click on the first line, hold down the shift key, click on the last line, and that selects all of them, and then go up to these buttons which you now see are live, and it's currently auto scheduled as shown by this little map pin. We're going to check to auto schedule and click that button, and straight away you see now it starts filling in information for me. So it's prompting me, is this a 1-day job? And it's defaulted, so everything shows as being today's date. Now what we're going to do is actually just widen out the control bar a little bit and look at this column, predecessors. What predecessors means is what job came before this one. So basically it creates a chain as you run through the program. So start job is the first job, and that's line number 1. Dig holes is the second job, and that follows line number 1. So the predecessor to this job is line 1. And straight away, you see, it links it and moves it out. So it's saying, when this job is finished, start on this job. Now, likewise, the next job, stand the fence post, follows dig holes. So the predecessor for it will be line 2. This is line 3 and 4, 5, 6. Because it's a straightforward follow on one from the other, it's quite an easy just linking system through, just hit the line number and away you go. So essentially now you can see it's created the chain of work that has to be done. Now if we go back now and look at the durations, which is this line, how long is the job going to take? And for this we're going to look at each task or each job in turn. So the first one is start the job. Now that actually isn't a job or a task as such, it's just a milestone marker that says, here we are, we're ready to start to do the job. So it doesn't actually have any time duration impact. It's literally, it's a 0-day job, and it's called a milestone, which just basically says, here we are. So it's a pegging point. So if I change the duration to 0 days, you'll see that this now changes to a little black diamond, and it has the date, and that just sets it out as being a milestone that says we start here. Now let's look at the actual task and what's involved in it. So we're going to put a fence down one side of a property. Let's say it's, one hole might take half an hour or an hour to dig. It depends on how you're digging it. If you've got an auger, you could probably do it in 10 minutes. If you're digging it by hand, it'll take a bit longer. So let's say, for sake of argument, it takes half an hour to dig a hole, clean it out, and get it ready for the fence post. And that's great, half an hour. But what if you've got 40 of them or whatever to do right down the length of the garden? So 40 times half an hour is basically 20 hours of work. So 20 hours of work on an 8-hour day is 2.5 days work. So that basically is nearly 2.5 days. That's assuming that the people work solidly, they don't stop for a cigarette, they don't go wandering off to buy a drink down the shop at the corner, and they actually work, full on. So the reality is, by the time they go and get their shovel, the time they have a cup of tea, the time they faff around, let's call it 3 days just to round it up. So 3 days work. And straight away you see that over here, it's lengthened out to cover 3 days. The next job, standing the fence posts. Well, with 40 fence posts, let's say it's, I don't know, put the fence post to length, stand it in the hole, nail on a couple of diagonal bracing stays, get the level on it to make sure it's plumb, get a line on it to make sure it's straight down the line and that they're all in line. Let's say again, that's, say, well, half an hour a fence post, an hour. Just thinking about the work, 10 minutes to cut it, say. By the time they actually carry the fence post to the hole, measure it for the length, cut the length, stand it up, brace, faff around with it. Let's call it an hour a post. So 40 posts is 40 hours. At 8 hours a day, that's 5 days work. Pouring concrete. Now, so once you've stood the post and they're all in line, the next thing to do is basically pour concrete to hold them in place. So 40 post holes, it's a couple of buckets of concrete a hole, and even mixing by hand, you would probably do all of that in a day. So let's call it 1 day's work. Now, as I said before, after you've poured concrete, you have to let it go off and harden. So let's say we have to give it 3 days to harden before you can actually do anything with it. Now, the first thing you notice here now is basically on this line, when we pour the concrete, we're pouring the concrete on a Friday. And 3 days curing time. Microsoft Project works in working days, not calendar days. So every job, if it takes 6 days, it would be basically starting on a Monday, it would be Monday to Friday plus the following Monday. It ignores the weekends as non-working time, which is why we have these shown in pink to show their non-working times. But from concrete's point of view, concrete doesn't know what day it is. So whereas here I've got 3 days, so it's counting 1 day to pour the concrete and then 3 days for cure, which is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. The next stage of the job, fixing the fence rails, doesn't start until Thursday. Now, that isn't quite right, because what about the Saturday and Sunday? The concrete will go off just the same Saturdays and Sundays as it does days in the week. So in this case, we're actually looking, instead of 3 working days, we're looking for 3 calendar days, or the way it's written up is 3 elapsed days. And basically the way we notate that is to override the non-working time and essentially tell project that it's 3 elapsed days, and to tell them that, you write it up as 3 E days. And when I hit enter on that, you see immediately then it ignores non-working time and counts the elapsed days. Now the next job, fixing the fence rails. So 3 fence rails, put the size nailed into place, let's say 20 minutes per bay. So that would be 3 bays per hour, by 39 bays would be 13 hours work. That's nearly just over a day and a half, nearly 2 days. So we'll round it to 2 days. Fixing the fence palings. Again, put the palings to size and then nail them on. Let's say, let's say half an hour a bay times 20. That's 20, half an hour times 40 bays would be 20 hours. So that's 2.5 days. Again, we'll round that to 3 days. And then paint the fence. How long to paint the fence? So if we said half an hour to paint a panel, a bay 2 meters long, 2 meters high, half an hour a side. So that's half an hour for the front side, half an hour for the back is an hour a panel. Times 39 panels is 39 hours. Again, call it 40 hours, that's 5 days. And then job complete. So like with the start of the job complete is basically just a milestone peg that says job's finished. So it's a 0-day task duration. And that essentially is it. That's how you put together a program, and every program is basically the same. Some jobs will have more component parts or various chapters of work or work streams, and the approach is essentially the same wherever you do. You break everything down into a work breakdown structure, you work out the logical methodology for what's going to be done, and then how long it's going to take. The next thing we need to do is tell project who's actually going to do the work, and in order to do this we fill in this column here where it says resource names, and this basically tells the job who's going to do each portion of the work. So for this example we're going to use 3 trades. I'm going to use a concrete team who will essentially dig the holes, stand the fence posts, and then pour the concrete. Once then the concrete has gone off and had time to cure, then we'll bring in carpenters to actually build the fence, and then finally we'll get a painter in to paint the fence. So starting off, in the first job, dig holes, and as I say, concrete gang. Concrete gang. And they're going to pour the concrete as well. Now you notice that as I start to write it in, it auto fills in the name of the resource, and as we build up the resources, it will carry on auto filling based on the information we're putting in. So curing time needs no resource because it's just basically standing time. So then the next people who come in will be the carpenters. And carpenters. And then finally, we're going to have a painter to paint the fence. And that's it. Now, you'll notice that as I've started putting these in on the right side of the bar here, it started putting in who's doing what. Now, whether this appears in everybody's version of project really just depends on what's been put in by default as the information to be shown. Basically, as with the Gantt bars, you can change the colors, you can change the look. It's exactly the same with the text that appears around the bars. And the way you actually get to change these is first double click anywhere on the Gantt chart to bring up the bar styles dialog box, and as we look in here, this is where we control the color on the Gantt bars, etc. There's also a tab here, you notice, that says text, and in here we'd say what text we want and where we want it. So you can see that text can either go to the left, it can go to the right, it can go above, below, or inside the bar. And as this is set up at the moment, it's got resource names ready set up. I could, for instance, if I want to know what tasks are actually happening on this, I could say to the left now we'll write name of the job to be done and click OK, and then it immediately puts in the names. Now my own preference is to actually not have that information showing. I personally would rather just have the ID number at this point, because as you can see this actually fills up quite a lot, and whilst I've only got sort of 9 lines in here, if I had 900 lines it becomes very crowded and not very clean and clear. Again, my preference is to keep everything minimal that I can for best illustration. So in this case I'm going to change this now just to show the ID number of the line, and essentially you can actually put in any of the information that's in project as a this is all of the background information that project holds on the job, and you can use anything and everything. In this case I'm just going to use ID number, which is the line number, and I click OK, and as you can see there then it just cleans it up quite a bit. Now while we're talking about this, I suppose it's a good time to discuss some of the other things that we can do with the Gantt bars and just around formatting and the way things look. So as I said, if I double click on the Gantt chart, I bring up this dialog box. Now whatever I do from this box, it sets a global change across all of the Gantt bars. So for example, now if I say I want all of these taskbars to appear in green, I change it to green, click OK, and they all change. Okay, now I go back into it and change it back to the blue where we first started, and you'll see it changes back. But I can also change things individually. So if I, for example, just wanted to change this one bar to green, I can double click on the Gantt bar itself and then just make the change to this one bar, and as you can see it then turns it green. Now I just turn it back to blue once again, and then click OK, changes it back. If now I'm looking at a global change here, let's say we're going to change the color is going to stay blue, but we're going to change it maybe to this I don't know, either a hatched or, I mean, this basket weave sort of pattern. If I now apply that across the board, you can see that it's now applied the basket weave pattern across the board, except for the one I just changed. And the reason for that is that when I make an individual change, it overrides the global setting, and I didn't actually undo my global my individual setting for that. what I actually did was just change it back to the color we'd originally gone. Now, if I just go back to where I sort of started a minute ago and take it back to the change, in order to change that back now to its global setting, what I need to do is go back. And the way you go back and undo your changes is either to press Control and Z, or you can use this go back. And although this one's grayed out, there's a go forward. So there's a go back and a redo button. So I'm actually going to step back now to undo the changes I made to take that back to a global position. And now, if I now go back into it and make a global change, say to this basket weave pattern again, and apply that, you see now it applies it across the board. And this is just all I'm sort of doing in here is just filling in ways in which you control things so you can understand what's going on if things sort of give you an unexpected result. Now, just changing back to where we were on that, I think it's worthwhile just discussing some of the other things that we've got here which we haven't talked about. These two columns here. The task mode column basically is the thing that sets out whether, as I said before, whether it's auto scheduled or manually scheduled, and that just gives you an indicator so that you know. This column, the information column, displays changes that you make to how the task is handled. So if let's say we're looking at painting the fence as an example. If I double click on painting the fence, it brings up this task information box. And this task information box is just a hidden view of information that it holds on this particular job. So under the general information, I've got the name of the task, I've got when it starts, when it finishes, how long it takes, and its percentage complete to date. At the moment it's 0, we haven't actually put any progress on it. If I go into the next one, it tells me what the predecessor is, and if I go into the next tab, the resources, it tells me that basically we've got the resource of painter against it and cost information, etc. The next one, the advanced one, tab, basically allows me to change the way in which project calculates when it gets done. As you can see here, it says that a constraint is a thing that sets out what's going to happen and how it's going to happen. So in this particular set at the moment, it's saying as soon as possible. And what that means is basically as soon as the job preceding finishes, this one can start. But let's talk about this now. This is due to start on Tuesday, the 26th of March. Now, what say the painter has told me, well, that's all great, but I actually can't get there until, say, Thursday, the 28th of March. So I can actually change the constraint on this, and because I know the contractor is not going to be available until a certain date, in this case, the 28th of March, I'm now telling project that although this says it could start as soon as this job's finished, because the contractor isn't available, he can't get there till the 28th. And then what I would do is I would make a note explaining what's going on. So contractor uh, earliest available date is 28th of March. I keep that as a note. And that basically is just a little note so that anybody who's following on and reading this program at a later date understands why all of a sudden a gap has come into the program. Because if I now click OK on this, you will see over here now that previously the painter was due to start here as soon as this job finished. Now it's moved out by 2 days. And if we look at this column over here, you see there's a little calendar that tells me there's a constraint set, and there's a little note icon to say that there's a note. And once I hover over that, it tells me what it is. This task has got a start no earlier date than the 28th of the 3rd, and the note tells me that the contractor's available date is the 28th. So it essentially gives explanation that somebody else can follow as to what's gone on and why this gap has arrived. And that's it. Just to summarize, Um, when you're putting the program together, you work out the logical steps in a breakdown sequence of the logical way in which the job goes. Once you've done that, then you input your resources and any other constraints or information that needs to go in. And that's essentially it. That's everything you need to know about how to program the job. No matter what size, it is all essentially the same thing.